Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerd Steve. Today I'm joined by this nerd.
How you doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
I am doing good, feeling well rested, and ready to talk about this next Unearthed Arcana playtest, which is part for the DMs and part for the players, but ultimately for the players.
Indeed, I enjoyed what this was conceptually. I feel in some ways some of it is a good start, but it definitely has yet another you know power creep aspect, or just is like, all right, well, everybody's gonna get some extra free stuff now. Go for it. And I'm like, fifth edition is already kind of like superheroes, so like really need to be going in this direction. I think there could have been more role playing opportunities with this that I feel like they missed out on.
Really, in what way? Because I feel like all the role play stuff is there. I don't disagree with you on the sentiment of power creep and in
Well,
some ways.
I mean, we get. I don't know how specific we want to get, but like a number of the features is like, oh, you can get this thing that allows you to cast, this spell over the next 7 days without expending a spell slot, or needing any material components, or oh, you get a magic item, or you get this thing that can replace the gold cost of any spell that you cast once in the next 7 days. So like, I feel like it's just like, all right, more abilities, here you go, here's some more abilities. We
Sure.
didn't need more abilities.
Well, sure, like that definitely addresses the power creep. But as far as the lack of role playing, like I feel like the fact that you're adding in all these extra NPCs
Hmm.
and even the events that can happen can be
Oh,
story beats.
sure. I feel like while they did add a role playing aspect to it, and there's even a line of like, oh, during the events phase, you can even have the players take on the roles, on the of those NPCs that they've created. So like, it's not no role play. I just feel like there could have been other things that were done. But do we want to break down, what it is before we get into any more of those specifics? I
Sure.
I
So
kind
this
of
play,
derailed it.
yeah, this play test was titled Bastions and Cantrips, and basically it is adding in this concept of having a headquarters for your player characters that they're just going to get at a certain point, with the addendum of here's some changes we made to some cantrips in the last like page or two. But it's like 23 pages, 22 pages, and most of it is dealing with what they're calling bastions, which is a system that's going to overlay on top of the existing systems.
Right.
Which I kind of like that aspect because I always felt like 5e was designed to do that. But also you're not wrong when you say like the way this system is going to work from fifth level on, you're just going to begin to gain access to new abilities that you can use.
Mm.
I mean, let's face it, like they're like a lot of times those abilities are like once per adventure, so it's not like and you may even miss the opportunity to use them depending on how much time goes by.
Right.
So while it is more power, I find it to be rather marginal except for certain things. Like basically your HQ can become a waypoint or a save point in the game for you. Where if you die, it's like, oh, your hirelings go retrieve your corpse and resurrect you.
Yeah. That was
Um,
that was one of them that I kind of had an issue with. So like, the concept is at fifth level, your base starts to do something, but it encouraged you to work with your GM that from the get go, you've got this secure space. And you know, given the way Nerdarchy has tended to run games since we started playing fifth edition, I feel this fits our playstyle really well, because I like this, concept of always coming back to the same spot. Years ago or editions past when we played, I felt like our characters were wanderers, never really based out of a single location. And like, we would wander our campaign world and get to see all amazing things, but very rarely did we have a spot that was like, yep,
yeah.
this is where we keep coming back to. So I dig that aspect of it. But, this concept of, all right, well, the way the system works is every 7 days, every week in game, you get a bastion turn. And depending upon, what kind of rooms you put in your bastion will determine what kind of thing you have access to. If you're like a priestly type character, you could have a shrine. If you're a wizardly type character, you could have a study or a research, laboratory. If you're a fighter, you could have a smithy, or you could have, some kind of like training location, so on and so forth. And each of these locations comes with a cool thing that you can do. And then as you kind of continue these turns, you build up bastion points, and you can turn those bastion points in to get stuff like magic items and what have you.
Yeah, but generally you can't get the special abilities and the stuff at the same time. Usually you're stuck choosing between one or the other. It's like a mini game within the game. Jeremy Crawford has gone to describe this as a way for the players to have narrative control over this one aspect of the world that is their fortress, their headquarters, their bastion. But in addition to that, though, there still are outside influences that affect it, because at the end of every bastion turn, you basically roll on a chart to see if something happens or not. It could be good, it could be bad, or nothing could happen at all. So like that can be interesting. And before we delve even deeper into it, as far as how it works, I would like to talk about it through the lens of Nerdarchy and how we run games, because absolutely there's aspects of this that we already do in our games. The aspect of putting down roots, and it's not unique to Nerdarchy, but I know a lot of other gamers do. But in more recent times in our games have become more episodic in nature. So generally, we try and have a place that is the base of operations for the characters to go back to after every session, right? So we've kind of been doing this. There's just been no mechanical components to it for the most part. Although I will say sometimes things happen and things have to get paid for or fixed because of the players being there. So that is something that Bastions is also meant to do. It's also meant to drain resources or actually increase resources, but the amount it increases versus how much it can decrease is significantly different, right? Like you can add on to your Bastion and basically make I guess more like cosmetic changes don't necessarily affect where you're getting special abilities a lot of times. Most of those upgrades they cost gold, but it's just like, oh well, I want my place to be cooler. There's not necessarily a benefit to it, or upgrading a section of it could make it slightly better, but not like a whole lot better. So I think it helps with some of the arguments that I've heard about 5e, like there's not enough things to spend gold on that mean something.
Sure. And this is a way to kind of sink into that. And I know, when I look at, the aspects of, our campaign that you ran, our Griffin Gaff game, like our characters had a decent amount of money. And it was like, what are we doing with all this stuff? So much it was like, yeah, my character's so wealthy, and I cast temple. So I'm gonna make a school, and I'm gonna make it free, and I'll just pay people out of my vast wealth to to teach. And if I somehow run out of money, then I'll worry about that aspect, then as to how I'm going to keep paying people. But at that point in time, I was like a 20th level character. So I was like, what do I need money for?
Yeah, so I think it tries to address that a little bit. And then another thing that we started doing in our games, and we can't take credit for it because it was something that Scott Garibay, somebody may be familiar from our channel, he's got a YouTube channel, would do, is be like, he would do it in his own games, and he even asked if he could do it in our games, is like, if your character is not going to be involved in the scene, but like you still want the player to be involved, he introduced the idea of, well, how about just use an NPC right out of like the monster section of the player's handbook, right? Like, and insert that character, or like in a Star Wars game, you had like I guess pre-made characters where there's the other missions were going on that didn't involve our characters, but here play this character instead. So you, the player, is still doing something, even if your character isn't in those scenes. Which, yeah, I think it's a fantastic way of mixing it up. And they talk about that here. Like, if something important's happening, they're talking about, being able to do cutscenes away from the main adventure back to this other adventure, which, could be going on in and around your bastion. Like, one of the things is like a marauding beast or monster, and you have to send out people to go and subdue it. So you could very much do that and, run a different adventuring party for that, for an encounter or a session even, to
So
mix it up.
so another thing, like, we described that there's these bastion events, like you declare what all happens, on your turn. You make all your choices, and then you roll on this chart. And you have hirelings that you have that are doing this whole thing. So they're responsible for all the stuff when you're not there. But 11 through 12 is up. You lost hirelings. They're just gonna die. Um, and you just have to, you get to describe what happens. You get full disclosure. They're gone, but you as the player get to describe. All right, your blacksmiths or your pub workers have all been killed,
Mm.
left, or what have you. You write the story about what it was that transpired, and then this way, like, all right, you are going to lose that turn of whatever that unit was for the next turn, but then you get new people that you'll get to reassign and what have you. So,
Some
like,
of them are fun too. Like, oh, it turns out Bob, the bartender, he was actually a crook in his past life, and you have the option of bribing those that come looking for him or turning them over. Right? Like either way, you don't lose the hireling, but you kind of get the fun aspect of like creating that part of the story, and regardless of what direction you go through. And maybe that's a cutscene where the GM goes, okay, how about some of you guys act as the bounty hunters, and some of you guys act as Bob and the hirelings that are there, and do this scene where it's all about diplomacy essentially, where you're going
yeah,
to.
I think that could be a lot of fun to, like, come up with that on the fly. Now, not everybody is able to, handle that kind of change. I know some people are, not that I've gamed with a whole lot of methods, but or method actors, but like some people, they really get into character and they don't transition well from, oh, this is what I am, to, oh, well, now for this next 10 minutes I've got to be somebody completely else and then get back to this guy. Yeah, that's more work than I'm really interested in doing.
Yeah,
But
well,
for the most part, okay.
like a couple of weeks ago I ran a one shot for a group, and the
Hmm.
person that kind of like was setting up the one shot is like, oh, and this person is going to be playing a paladin level down from a previous game because they only play paladins. So like maybe you run into that too.
Well, I mean, in that case, well, then perhaps one of the bounty hunters is a paladin. Like, all right, you describe who it is and play the same character that you're used to doing, but instead of Bob the Paladin, it's Rob the Paladin. Sure, whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, play what is comfortable for you when you get the ability to get shunted in this situation.
You can also combine your bastions, right? So you can have a mega fortress if you want. I'm not like
So
I was a little unsure exactly how it works from like the reading of it because I only read it through once today
right.
before we decided to talk about it. But I mean, again, that sounds kind of cool, and it sounds like something a lot of our groups would do anyway.
All right, so I'm gonna derail for a moment. Having every character have you know their own bastion, or oh, well, there's five people in the party, so we're gonna have one building that has you know five separate areas off of it. It's got enough land that it can be expanded upon, and then one central chamber and what have you. And then you can build on to have bedrooms and kitchens and laundrettes and whatever you want to do.
Right.
Uh, to me, I feel like to just automatically just be like, here you go, you've got the thing. While, yeah, a DM working from the very beginning of a game might be able to work something like that out, I really feel like if you're going to do this kind of thing, I like the idea, number one, of it being a single location so that you're not having to roll, all right, every single person has to get, their own event roll to find out what happens because every 7 days you have to do that.
No way, man. I
I
would
can,
still require everyone to do an event roll, and they just all the events happen.
I feel like that takes away way too much. Like, all right,
Uh,
well, are we going like if we have a week go by where the characters are just traveling, it's like, oh well, after 7 days, all right, let's take the next 50 minutes to do, 5 event rolls to and role play out all of these little things, and then say, all right, well,
well, here's the thing.
now what, now back to
It's still playtest, right?
sure,
And even in the playtest, they're like, well, maybe in your game you do every 2 weeks or whatever. Like
sure,
maybe in our game, like we decide to run this and everyone combines into one big HQ. And by big, I mean when you start off, if you have 5 players, that's 20 areas. So it's some of those areas are really tiny and some of them are very big. So
mhm,
so it's not really like that's not really a big deal. The every 7 days might be a bit much, but it once a month maybe not so bad. And it depends how often you're playing, and also I would say if this is something you're doing in your games, the idea behind it, the concept is it didn't just appear all of a sudden. Things
right.
have been happening in the background to make it happen. So this would be like a good discussion to have during session 0, maybe about
That's
are we using
that was
bastions and like how are we going to use them, what is your concept, and then like if the DM knows at level 1 at level 5 this thing's going to happen, you can start like building up to it, and also it'll make the event a little bit more special if you build in like some touchstones throughout the levels up to level 5 that would kind of be like pointing in the direction for the them ultimately getting their fortress, their HQ, whatever you want to call it.
and that was one of the building blocks that I was going to do of saying number one, yes, having a session 0, talking about bastions, getting characters to begin making NPCs, introducing NPCs into the game, and like if you know from level 1 where characters are looking to go bastion wise, like you can introduce NPCs and like total video game style, because I've definitely played games
Mm.
that this is touching on, where it's like, oh, we've talked to, the Tabaxi rogue who, is out of the business, but they would be a great hireling. And you've talked to him 2 or 3 times. Well, now he's part of your base. Like that could be a cool thing of like finding characters that they've already interacted with, not just like, all right, well, I'm going to make this character whole cloth. Not that that's a problem if they want to do that too, but I find inserting some characters that they could be able to pull from would be a lot of fun. Would be something that could be unique to do.
Yeah, and I know there's definitely going to be people that are going to rail against this
Sure.
because it feels a little too um video gamey, right?
Hmm.
Especially like people that are our age or older, right? But like I mean, the game at this point is what, like 50 years old. Um,
Closing in.
here's the thing: a lot of the players that are playing now and players coming into the game, right? Like where we grew up with video games, they grew up on video games,
Hmm.
right? So like to them, that is just a natural medium, and it only makes sense that some of the other mediums would start to reflect that, right?
Yep.
Especially as as the game ages, and there's eventually there'll be more people that are playing the game that didn't have the experience that we had, right? Didn't really experience video games being influenced by D&D the same way as now it seems like video games are influencing D&D. So to me, that is the natural progression.
Right.
Now, you can be old guy, get off my lawn about it, or you can be like, all right, well, this is just the direction things have gone in, because that's where we've gone as a hobby, as a
Sure.
civilization,
And like I said, I don't want anyone to think that I'm against this. I'm absolutely in love with the concept. I just feel like some of the execution is not the direction that I would go. I honestly feel, rather than just like, all right, level 1, you're working on getting a location. Well, not everybody's ready to have a location. Level 5, all right, poof, it all comes together, and everybody now has all of these things. It's already happened. If it to take nods from the aspect of uh the video game, rather than just poof, it happens. Level 5 now becomes even more magical, with this concept. I think it could be encouraged to be worked into the things that are ongoing in your quest. And you have to find a way to unlock, and you have to do these things. But of course, this puts more work on the DM and the players, as opposed to like, oh, all of this just happened in the background. Which is very hand wavy, and that's an aspect that I don't like. I don't want things happening in the background. I want my character doing the things. Like, I don't need to be doing what the hirelings are doing once I have them. But I want to do the things. I want to I mean, as corny as this expression is, I want to unlock the thing, not unlock the thing just because I gained the XP. Does that make sense?
Yes. And the funny thing though is, in earlier editions,
Uh-huh.
going back to first and second edition, at a certain level, like
Strongholds.
you attracted followers, right? Like the 20th level ability of the barbarian from the original Unearthed Arcana book was to summon a friggin' barbarian horde. Fighters began, getting retainers and attracting an army. Wizards began attracting apprentices. I think clerics, had their own following of, religious zealots and whatnot that they would attract. A thief would
Strongholds and
start their.
followers were definitely a thing, but even with as much as we played, I don't know if we ever got to those levels, or if we just like, nope, we're not using those rules, because like it
It,
definitely didn't happen in my games.
yeah, it's a combination. I only played in a couple games where it became a thing where we started doing that. In third edition, we did have some games where it did happen, but it wasn't because of the rules. It was because of in-game story things that happened, where we started putting together like our own followers, I guess. Matter of fact, it was our first third edition game really that happened in, that I played in anyway as a player,
Okay.
not as the GM. Towards the very end of the session of that campaign that Ryan ran, I think we had like 300 halfling followers or something.
Oh.
Insane. And even in Steve's game, and that was AD&D, we started attracting followers and amassing an army.
Was that in our pseudo evil game?
Yes.
So that game, I vaguely do remember that, but I feel that was yet another one of those situations where, as much as I, love Steve as a friend, there were and we've said this before, like, he was the DM where like the sweet spot was to make him not care about your character.
One
'Cause
way or the other, yeah.
if he loved your concept or hated your concept, you were doomed. And I had made this fighter who, like, I created him with the concept of like he wants war. His goal is to be a general in an army. And what does he do? He makes me be a king. And I'm like, what the hell, man?
Hey
So
man,
like, so
sometimes
like
sometimes it just happens.
so like we got into this situation where like, we were, I believe when we stopped that game, like we were getting ready for like full on mass invasion and mass war, and it was a whole thing. But like I can still, picture the scene of him describing, Zon Galrin sitting on this throne, and I'm like, all right, this is kind of cool. Didn't really want a throne.
Well, man, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Like sometimes you choose the kingdom, and sometimes the kingdom chooses you.
I mean, it is what it is, and it wasn't a bad thing. It just was a minor, minor difference.
Yeah.
Like technically, kings can still lead an army. I can still fulfill this role as as general. So like he still got me to what I wanted to do. It just I didn't want the responsibility of everything else. I just like he wanted the carnage, he wanted the destruction of, leading people into battle and, winning wars. And I thought that would be, a cool thing and a divergence from
Uh huh.
the usual battle lust that Ted had back then.
Well, careful what you wish for. You just might get it. Plus some more.
Sure.
so like I guess that's a very long way for us saying like this stuff has kind of always been part of the game in one aspect or another. They're just codifying it and making it easier for folks to engage in it in whatever they want, whatever they way they want. Like part, in the like they even give rules for basically assembling a war band. Although I think you have to be pretty high level in order to do that. And it's not really that many soldiers for I feel like anyway for the level you are, because I think you have to be like 17th level before you can have the war room and the lieutenants that go along with it, and then you can like summon so many. There's a cost to it, but you can summon so many soldiers to you, or half as many if you want them to be mounted
Yeah. So like
on riding horses, because war horses would be too good for you.
yeah. So I mean, technically, you're 17th level before you can get the war room. It comes with one lieutenant, and then you can hire more or recruit more using your, your bastion turns. But each lieutenant can summon essentially for 7 days up to 100 soldiers. Sorry, yeah, 100 soldiers or 20 guards if you want them to be ridden on riding horses. So like, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you if you get, your maximum, you can get up to 10 lieutenants at a time. That could be 1,000, guards that you could just be like, all right, we're gonna march all of these in.
Bro, you wouldn't
Now,
even be a statistic in the Battle of the Five Armies. All right,
sure,
at
sure,
a
sure.
thousand.
But the problem is, if you're gonna march these guys, you got to feed them. Every person costs, one gold a day in food. So like, all right, you're gonna charge these guys for 7 days. That's seven grand. If you're maxed out. Sorry, 10,000 gold. Sorry, I'm using the number seven. No, yeah, got 1,000 soldiers, 7 days, 7,000. What the hell?
Math.
I don't know. I don't know how I'm second guessing myself, but seven grand to march this army for a week. That's a lot of money. Just saying.
Maybe not for 17th level character.
Not
That's
when
what.
the other person's spending 100 grand to make a legendary magic something or other.
Yeah, or you just gotta be churning out that other stuff to offset your cost.
Yeah,
But
because you can You can if you've got the let's see here, if you've got the scriptorium at level 9, uh and then you get to 17th level, you can craft a legendary scroll, and it only costs you 100,000 gold.
That's it. So that's a long way of saying you get to do some fun things. It's kind of cool. I like it. It is a way to siphon off money. Now, also, if you're the DM that doesn't want your players interjecting magic items into your game, this might be an annoyance for both you and the players, right? Because if the players are like, "Oh, I got enough bastion points to do X," and then and then you're constantly as the DM going, "No, you can't get that magic item. No, you can't get this magic item." That could be frustrating for both of you.
Sure.
So like you're gonna have to lay out all the parameters for what you're gonna accept as a GM beforehand, and hopefully get your expectations from the players, what they're looking to get out of having a bastion. But I mean, there's enough there to incorporate into your game right now. If you wanted to start using it and experimenting and seeing what you could how it plays out in your games. And
I
like I said, we're kind of already doing it, so I don't think it'd be a big deal.
Yeah, I feel like the if people are playing regular 5e and they're trying to incorporate this one, the hardest one to do would be the training room, whereas like, all right, you can use the weapon properties for
Mm.
whatever it is that you're using, which if you're not playing with weapon properties right now,
Yeah.
that's a little weird, but it could be something to really begin trying out. Of like, all right, well, we're not usually using them, but you know, Bob the fighter, is the only one that really appeals to them. So sure, let's allow you to fool around with this and see what
So
happens and see
so
how they work.
so before we're at the halfway mark, so before we go any further, we definitely want to get into a reference that they made that is from third edition and previous editions that I don't know if you picked up on, Ted, but I do. We certainly did. They're using it a little bit different way. Before we get to that, real quick, we're going to be doing another Kickstarter in a month and a half or so from now. For our own game, Zoo Mafia RPG. There's a link down in the description to sign up to get notified. Hey, please do. Please check it out. We greatly appreciate it. We had a lot of fun designing that game, and we want to make it a thing for you guys to check out. But also, as always, these live streams are sponsored by Easy Roller Dice. Whether it's your first set of dice or your 1 millionth set of dice, Easy Roller Dice for all your dice rolling needs. There's a promo code down in the description, so go grab that and get yourself some cool dice at a discount. Do you have any business for us?
Well, I got something to tag on to both of those things. Number one, for Zoo Mafia, please share that information out there, whether it be, early to, get the notification page that's out there, or, get it to anybody that might be interested that haven't heard about it. Because in the first, the early backers are going to get access to some dice that maybe later on in the campaign they'll get unlocked as an add-on that can be purchased. But if you back early, you're going to get access to those dice for free on any of the physical level purchases. So go get in on that, get that notification page so you don't miss out on that one. In relation to Easy Roller Dice, they've got some cool sharp edge resin dice and glass dice that they're sharing around on their Facebook page. They're absolutely beautiful. You have to check them out. And I just got a package from our lovely friends over at ERD because while we're still figuring out the date, stay tuned. The next game that we have of the Old Guard, which is sponsored by our friends at Easy Roller Dice, we're gonna figure out the details too. But we're gonna do a giveaway to people who watch and comment on that particular video. So stay tuned for details. So next time you see an episode of Old Guard, I'll have the details for you then. So
Or
back to
probably
you.
we'll share around the details beforehand so you can actually know how to
Yeah,
roll
that
the
too.
dice. But anyway, so did you catch the reference
I
to
did not.
Masterwork weapons?
Oh, that I did see that one, And I totally laughed out loud because it's like, hey, do you want to spend 800 gold to make a non-magic item that if you cast magic weapon on, it becomes a permanent magic item that then could be sold for 500 gold?
Yeah.
I'm like, that is stupid.
Yeah, I didn't do the math on it, but it makes me wonder if the Masterwork weapon is going to something return in whatever the other core books are. Um,
Well, I'm in love with the concept of Masterwork. I feel like, fifth edition took a step back in regards to, that direction. And I feel like they could have done something with it.
yeah,
And I believe you've done this concept in uh what do you call it? In one of your games, and correct me
yeah,
if I'm wrong, but
it's
like,
under the dome. I know where you're going. Um, so I've been agonizing over how to make a decent Masterwork weapon in 5e that's meaningful. And then I came about and I came full circle. I was like, I am overthinking this. Masterwork weapons are so easy in 5e. They are literally just a +1 to hit and damage. They are not magic weapons, so they don't overcome resistance, and they definitely don't overcome immunities. So it's not like they nullify and make magic weapons irrelevant. You still need them in the game in many instances, but it also is a way to make cool non-magical weapons that are meaningful with the game mechanics. I have no idea how to make it meaningful when it comes to armor though.
right. So I think you went even further than what I remember, but as a recollect for me, Masterwork are either a +1 to hit or a +1 to damage, not both.
No, I did,
Uh,
but yeah, from previous editions, but 5e makes it simplifies everything, so I just went with +1 for both.
sure. So I think what, regardless of which concept you like, I feel it should represent something, and I think that's a solid way of doing it. I don't know how 5e is planning to do it, but if they're going to have this concept of masterwork, it should mean something. Uh, not to be like, well, it looks pretty, because you know that you don't spend an extra 700 gold to have something just look pretty. Like, come
Yeah.
on, man, it needs to be something here. And why 800 gold for an item that legitimately, as a +1 magic item, they're valued in the DMG at 500 gold. Like,
That part needs a little work, but again, like magic items, crafting, that's always been a sore spot in 5e anyway. Maybe
yep.
that's something they're going to address, and it'll
No, I
make more
mean,
sense with the rest of the rules. Like
sure.
maybe you can sell it for 1,000, when the rules get revised. Because most of the stuff that they do that you create, like if there's a cost, a lot of times it's half. So they've like on more of the mundane stuff. So they seem to be fixing it, and maybe we're just missing a piece of it.
Sure.
Uh,
And like, that's why it's playtest.
yeah,
And like, there are certain numbers. Like, every once in a while I just espouse, like, it's like, oh my god, how does he know that off the top of his head? Like, well, there's certain things that I've retained, that, like, I just recall. And this is just one of them. Like, all right, the number of times that DMs have said, all right, we're going to start at this level, you have this much gold, but no buying magic items. So it's like, okay, all right, other DMs are like, oh, well, you have this much gold and you can use the DMG to buy magic items for, that
yeah.
kind of equivalent. It's like, all right, sweet. So,
So Kurth, Wayne, and after playing Dragon Heist and seeing how most players had indifference to being given a house tavern, uh, could be run, make me wonder just how often the rule set is going to be used. That being said, the one guy who was into it was super into it, even more than the DM maybe could handle. Yeah, so I guess there's that aspect of, but then again, like Doug ran a Spelljammer game where like the players super got into hiring new crew, outfitting their outfitting their quarters and shopping for that shit and going over the contract details and like doing shit that I feel like normal people are like, no, thank you. Like, and so, but that's what they like. His group was really into that, so it's hard to say, as a whole, because all we do is have like the sample size a lot of times of what our groups are and the people we play with. And I will say, like, our group runs the gamut for that kind of stuff. So, like, some players don't care at all, and some players are that person that are super into it.
Well, I mean, for me, like, I'm not gonna do contract negotiations in a D&D game. Like that sounds, a little ridiculous, but
And
I love the concept of,
that's why
having
you're
a
gonna
base.
gloss over it and lose your soul.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that your paladin or warlock that you played?
That's every warlock. I feel like pretty much.
But like, I dig this kind of stuff, and I feel like this is a real deep dive into some of the options that you can do. I'm definitely gonna pick this apart and like offer some options,
Yeah.
and do it as a group thing as opposed to an individual thing. For my kids game, which is currently my only active game that I'm running.
Dude, honestly, when I was reading it, all I could think about was your kids' game.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I
I
don't know.
mean, right now, right now they have a building that, like, as I'm reading, I'm already thinking about the different things that I want to do. It's
Like,
lower
no, no, no.
floors.
First of all, let's back up a little bit. What were some of the schemes that they came up with to make money, as opposed to adventuring, where they would make way more? But like, what
All
were the
right.
schemes?
So most of this is perpetrated by this kid Gabe. He's same age as my son, 15 years old, and he's got an awesome mind, fantastic freaking role player. So he's got an artificer that his backstory is he owes a lot of money because he made two warforges as a contract, and he's got to pay the guy back. So he owes like 50,000 gold pieces as like a level 3 character. Utterly ridiculous. So he decided, his first venture was that he was going to buy forks, bend them, and sell them as a 4-pronged fishhook. And, he was making persuasion checks, trying to get people to buy his thing, and wound up selling some to even some of the other players at the table. Utterly ridiculous. And then the one day, these kids show up, and they had apparently been talking, away from the table, that they're gonna make, they're gonna buy chickens and sell the eggs. you know, Thinking that somehow this is gonna be far more profitable than just going out and adventuring. And I'm like, you're talking about selling eggs, like you're gonna be getting coppers, whereas like finding like a single item out there might get you 100 or 200 gold pieces. You sure this is where you? Okay, fine, this is where we're going. So we
Chicken
had like
farmers.
we had like one session that was this whole ordeal of locating a building in town, stalking, town officials to try and find out what the documentation was supposed to look like, forging a basically like a bill of sale to say that they own this building now, and then getting the supplies to actually build chicken coop. I'm like, I can't believe this is what I'm doing. And a number of problems have happened because apparently some of the chickens that they acquired were not, so shall we say, completely chicken. There were some cockatrices involved,
Hate when that happens.
so it's created a number of anomalies. But like once they owned the building, like they were all into the, all right, they're pulling out paper and they're doing a design. Okay, where do you want your place to be? What do you want in it? And like they're all into the thing. So like I had the exact same thought pattern of like, all right, the Cluckery as their place is called is absolutely going to have to be their bastion.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking about like what kind of things I want to do, to like kind of turn that into the bastion. Um, and as opposed to like the them hiring
They're gonna
somebody.
spend all their bastion points on generating extra eggs.
It's possible. But like I'm gonna have a hireling show up. Like they're gonna come back from a mission and he's just gonna be there working. It's gonna be like, oh hey.
Like
And
the
then I'm gonna like
goblins.
I mean, in an essence, there's some, sense there.
Oh my
But like
god,
I'm gonna have them.
you should make that hireling a goblin from the other campaign or one of their relatives.
I could, but what I'm planning to do is basically, allow them to describe like, okay, let's figure out who this person is and give them the agency. So they're still gonna get the design what the
Uh,
hireling is, but they're there working, not like, oh my god, they're trying to steal my stuff. Like, no, hey guys, I've been keeping things ship shape while you were gone. Patched
got
up the
10
hole in the
copper
wall.
for them from selling eggs.
And they'll be, whatever the appropriate amount of coin, from the time frame that they were gone, sitting there waiting for them.
So we talked about bastions a bunch yet so far. We got like 12 minutes left. Want to get into cantrips?
So there's not a huge amount to talk about with this, but sure, let's dive
Well,
deep into the
I
revised
all
cantrips.
right. There's some things. All right, acid splash now is an AOE, and basically you can target more than one square at a time, and they're very much playing off of you can target the lines on a grid, and that's how you get more than one at a time. So you can get up to four with acid splash. Um, so making it much more effective than it was. They made Blade Ward, uh, in some ways not as good as it was, but in other ways much better. So, but previously, like the only use I found for Blade Ward is if you were able to cast a cantrip and a and do another action on a round. And because then it became super useful because you just get resistance to all damage, I believe is what it was before, which is not bad. But the problem is it costs you your action to do it. So you're not moving forward in the combat if that's all you're doing. You're just
Right.
dying slower. So without being able to couple it with something else like an Eldritch Knight could do it, or maybe a sorcerer, um, with a quicken spell. But other than that, it wasn't as useful. But now it's just a reaction you can use on yourself for someone attacking you with a melee attack to give them disadvantage. Now, I would feel I don't know if I like that or if I would prefer if it was still resistance or like resistance for the round, and
Hmm.
instead of making it just basically, it's kind of like half of silvery barbs now.
Right.
So it again, like you're gonna be able to use it more often, but it's not quite as good. So I don't know how I feel about that one.
Sure. Now what about chill touch? Now being, a higher die of damage, but it's a touch spell since it's called chill touch. And they cut out the undead aspect of the spell.
Yeah, I mean, again, chill touch, like, and they're right because the one aspect it wasn't getting used much, and also it just wasn't getting. I don't think that spell get used much in general, right? But anytime you're a caster and you have to touch things, it's never particularly great.
That was that that
Friends is vastly improved because now it's a charm spell, but it doesn't make everyone instantly angry at you after you use it on them, and it just gives you advantage on social interactions. So, it's gonna get a lot more use. And also it's gonna encourage people to take a non combat specific, non like miscellaneous type cantrip, right? So I feel like it's going to see a lot more gameplay. Poison spray is always been a fun cantrip, but the problem with it is always been the range has been too close.
Mm-hmm.
So like, who wants to use that, right? Like, um, it's got it had the problem that now chill touch will have. Except for, I mean, the nice thing about chill touch, like if you're using chill touch against things that regenerate like trolls, it's actually super useful. But also being a mage and being next to a troll, not so useful. So that could definitely go bad.
Chill touch Misty Step.
Yeah, you're gonna wanna.
All right,
uh,
now poison spray. It's now necromancy rather than conjuration. I
yeah,
don't get that.
I don't know. I don't care that much anyway about that per se. It's still doing poison damage, and you got a good range. It does a decent amount of damage, and I think that's kind of nice. Produce flame is now a bonus action to cast, but you have to use the magic action if you want to hurl it, and you can now also use it to set things on fire because you can hit things that aren't necessarily um a creature. So that is kind of cool, because and also in a lot of our games we generally just let people use their cantrips on things that aren't creatures anyway, if it seems like it'd be fun or interesting in the game. Like, I don't feel like that breaks it. And also it seems weird too. It's like, Ray of Frost is a good example. Like, I think you can only target a creature with it, but for some reason, if you point at a wall, it just won't work. Like, now I'm not saying it should necessarily do anything, but like, it seems weird to be tell the player, "No, you can't do it." So as a GM, you just kind of arbitrate those things. Now I don't. So I guess the thing though is, if you throw it, does it still last for 10 minutes where it lands? Like, I'm not saying if you hit a creature with it, they should be on fire for 10 minutes, unless they're super flammable. But is the fire still, like, is the ball of flame still in that square?
I think it's a scenario of, you produce flame into your hand. You can then throw fire, but it doesn't throw all of your fire. You can keep throwing every round, because until the spell ends, you can take the magic action to hurl fire at a creature or object within 60 feet of you. Make the attack. On a hit, the target takes fire damage.
Oh, that
Doesn't
makes
say,
yeah, that makes sense. Like, it keeps forming in your hand. Is that what you're saying?
yeah.
All right, I like that. And so, like, I'm kind of indifferent to that change, because I think you could cast it and throw it anyway, right? Like, the way it was written, they just worded it a little bit different. Where it really comes into play is if you wanted to summon it and then do something else. Like, you're like, I'm gonna produce flame and keep it in my hand because I need light, but I also want to cast call lightning, right?
Right.
Then you could do something like that. So I'm kind of like indifferent. Shillelagh, I think a lot of people are going to be unhappy about this
All right. So what's your beef here?
one. All right, so I mean, it's nice you can do bludgeoning damage or force damage,
Mm-hmm.
but it I believe you have to use your, let's see, you get to use your spell casting ability, which is good. The damage is good, die 8. I thought I read somewhere is where it was a magic action.
No, it's just, if the attack deals damage, it can be force damage with a weapon's
Oh no,
normal
okay,
damage.
no, it's not.
Your choice.
Okay, I might be mixing that up with something else, because there's be like, that would totally suck.
But like, as a cantrip, it starts off at a D8 and then goes D10, D12, 2D6. So like, they're not like they're scaling it, like a weapon, but
Yeah,
legitimately, if you compare that to like other cantrips, like, all right, well, maybe they don't want the you know,
Well,
the fighter druid getting shillelagh and then like, all right, I'm gonna use this as my primary attack. 5d8,
well,
5d8,
no,
5d8.
no, it's like the druid and the ranger was really good for them if you wanted to go into combat, like, or if you're any caster that gets a hold of that spell, and you could also get that spell very easily through like magic initiate.
Hmm.
Um, so like that spell in the hands of a monk is really really strong
Sure.
because you're making all of those attacks. You could be doing that damage,
I
right?
wasn't even thinking about monk, but yeah, sure, that makes a lot of
But
sense.
but even a ranger, you're a ranger with hunter's mark, and you also it's you can use it as a one-handed weapon.
Yeah,
So for anyone, it's kind of useful that way. So anyone that can get their hands on that and they get extra attack, that's why it doesn't scale a other
sure.
cantrips, because
I mean, I wasn't expecting it to go to 5d8. I just felt like, all right,
yeah.
for it being a cantrip that scales, 2d6 feels a little light. Just saying.
Yeah, well, that's because it's incorporating the fact that you can probably attack more than once with it,
Right.
depending on how you're using it. Unless you're just like a druid and you're like, oh shit. Shocking Grasp. Shocking Grasp got downgraded, and honestly, Shocking Grasp of the touch spells, in my opinion, was always a good one for a caster, because if you hit with it, you took away their reaction. Now you only take away their ability to take an attack of opportunity. So they kept the thing where like it's still good because you can use it to get out of dodge without casting like Misty Step or something like that, and just use your movement if as long as you hit them with Shocking Grasp. Now it
Does
also
not
made me
stop the
think.
counterspell.
Well, that's just it. It just made me thought. It's like we're not really that good at D&D, I guess, in our groups, because why wasn't our mages with Shocking Grasp over there next to their spellcaster, or somebody with Shocking Grasp over there next to their spellcaster, shutting them down, right? Like that. Is that happening in a lot of games? Because that's the only thing I can think of that they're trying to stop. Because
I imagine so. I imagine that there's a lot of Eldritch Knights that are out there that are like charging into that's an
yeah.
enemy spellcaster combatant. I'm a shocking grasp that sucker.
Yeah, well, yeah. So there's two people that works really well for. Because I believe 7th level you can make an attack and you can cast a cantrip. So as a Eldritch Knight, you could still be offensive and shut down the spellcaster, right? We just never really seen that in our games. I mean, let's face it, it's super specific. Um, and Mage Slayer to that too, and that's a freaking awesome combination. I mean, I never even thought about that. But and then in addition to that, maybe the sorcerer, right? Because they can quicken, and they'd be able to, I'm going to shut down your spellcaster, but I'm also still casting spells. Screw you. Or maybe GMs were doing it to the spellcasters in their game and just shutting them down with the cantrip so that they can't counterspell or use silvery barbs. This may start happening in my own games, because the change hasn't happened yet. So I'm indifferent towards the change, but I also think it's kind of funny that in our groups, like, we never even thought about
Eh?
it, and also we
All
never
right,
did
so
videos on it. So
which is why we didn't do videos on it because it wasn't coming up in our games either as the
yeah.
player or the DM. All right, spare the dying. Now druid and can be done at a range.
I've been different towards it. I mean, it is that like I mean that I know that certain clerics, I think, got that as a feature where they could do it at a range that made it way better.
Hmm.
And also, it's not like the mage running into the center of combat when you're talking about the cleric, because especially like you're a life cleric, you're probably wearing freaking plate mail, and you have a shield, and you're like you can tank, right? So it's not as a big a
Right.
deal. But also, if you don't have to do it, that's cool too. So I'm indifferent on that. I think the one we really want to talk about though is True Strike.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this spell doesn't really exist, until now. What are
Yeah,
your
current
thoughts?
iteration, it sucks. It's useless. It's like I can make 2 rolls later or 1 roll now and 1 roll later. And so there's no point in ever true striking. This is a vast improvement. Still don't like it because look, we come from third edition. When you cast True Strike, first of all, it was a first level spell. It wasn't a cantrip, but you just got a +20 to the roll, and even if you made it roll to 1, you still hit as long as the number was high enough. That was badass. That was that was worth spending your action to cast a spell that you weren't going to be able to do anything else with, because that buff was going to matter next round. Or it was, I think you could cast it on someone else too, maybe.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either, but like if it was, that made it even better. But here it's like, okay, if you find yourself in a situation where you have to fight, you can now use a weapon, and now you can use your spellcasting ability to use it. Using the weapon, making the attack as part of the actual spellcasting. It has to be a weapon you're proficient with. And it can be radiant damage or the damage of the weapon, and it scales, doing more damage as you go up in level. So it's still not good. It's just not as bad as it was.
So, I mean, as a cantrip, I mean, you can be doing this kind of thing all the time. It's a bard, sorcerer, warlock, wizard spell. So I feel, given what it is now,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be strong for bards that want to get into melee or blade singers.
Bards, blade singers, and Hexblades. Yeah, Hexblades. Is this the one that had? I felt like something required you use the magic action, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of annoying.
I mean, the produce flame uses the magic action.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Until the spell ends, you can make it. Until the spell ends, you can attack with it, but you're gonna always have to use an action. You use your magic action to do it, so you can't really do a whole lot else, which kind of makes it not as good. Limits your options.
Sure.
And I'm not entirely sure how like spellcasting is going to work going forward too, with using the magic action and casting spells, if that's going to have any kind of play. So, I think I started to like transposing that on some of the other ones, but that's also with me just reading it all today. So,
sure, yeah. I mean, it's tough.
so
but we're a little past 9 o'clock. That's that was the last of the spells. Anything else you got to hit before we sign on out?
All in all, I think this was a pretty good playtest and Unearthed Arcana release, where like nothing was like, oh, I absolutely hate this. If anything, there's just parts that I was a little indifferent towards, or things that made me chuckle, like, oh, that's very video gamey. The internet's going to be very angry at this part, right? Like, but don't really matter to me that much personally.
Sure.
I think there's some fun things for you to grab and use in your games from here and see how they work out.
I would agree.
Does Shillelagh and True Strike stack? They would, but you're not going to get your modifier more than once. So I would say you could add the radiant damage to them. Let's see, one's an action, one's a bonus action. So yeah, I would say you could stack them together. Again, like you're gonna have to pull some shenanigans to get them both, but whether it's multi-classing or via feat like Magic Initiate, which I mean wouldn't be terrible, so you could you could technically be doing a damage upgrade, and they're different types of they're different types of damage. So you could be doing Force and Radiant at the same time, or Force and...
So it really won't matter until you reach level 5. Because before that, it's just, okay, do you want the damage to be Radiant, Force, or the regular? But once you get to level 5, then it could be like, all right, well, my weapon does a D10, and then I can add an additional D6 Radiant. And that die 10 can be one of 3 different types.
Yeah. I would also like say you have 2 different spellcasting abilities. You would choose which one you're going to use.
Sure.
You're not going to stack them together.
Correct.
And let's face it, even at 17th level, you're only doing 5d6 damage. Well,
that's still less than a firebolt of 40 10.
5d10, whatever it is. Yeah. So it's like, well, I would say yes, but it's hardly game breaking.
Right.
So unless you have like an overwhelming need to do both force and radiant damage, I mean, but there are resources that don't run out, so you can do it all day long, and it's not really a big deal.
Like Captain America says.
Yeah, like Captain America says. And then, like, you would get Shillelagh for all of your attacks, but you would only get your True Strike for one attack. So, and that being said, if you're casting True Strike, you can only get one attack. So, like, there's because it requires you to cast, use the magic action. So most of the things that will allow you to get more attacks, you're just not gonna be able to access unless the rules change significantly. So I guess that's my opinion on that.
And I would sink in with that just fine.
Cool. All right. Well, that's it for tonight. We're at that time. So until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.